Welcome to the last lecture in the last section of this course, Argument, Evaluation, and Reevaluation. In this lesson, we'll cover the devil's advocacy technique, and then you'll be ready for your final exam. The essence of evaluating an argument is to think critically, be skeptical, and ask lots of questions. The same process that you use to develop a sound, objective analysis of the facts is what you'll use to determine the strengths and weaknesses of another's argument. Now we'll combine our critical thinking skills with a specific structuring technique called devil's advocacy to evaluate an argument. The confidence in any argument is dependent on the facts applied in it. When evaluating an argument, it is imperative that you are able to distinguish what type of problem the argument is addressing: simplistic, deterministic, random, or indeterminate, so you can determine the role that facts and the role that judgment play into developing the chain of reasoning used in the argument. Simply said, the more judgment that is used, then the more likely that the argument will contain errors, because the accuracy of the argument is now contingent upon those judgments proving true. The most difficult analytic problems are of the random and indeterminate type, where, because facts are scarce, our analytic product depends heavily on subjective judgments. For that reason, there can be no certainty when dealing with random or indeterminate problems. The moment our analysis moves from facts to judgment, we leave certainty behind and enter the area of estimates. In further evaluating an argument, complete the following logic test. State as accurately as possible the proponent's purpose in making the argument. Figure out the key question addressed in the article. Figure out the facts, experiences, and data used to support the conclusion. Identify the key conclusions made. Figure out the most important ideas you would have to understand in order to understand the author's line of reasoning. Figure out what the author is taking for granted that might be questioned. What consequences are likely to follow if people take the line of reasoning seriously? What consequences are likely to follow if people ignore the reasoning? From what perspective was the argument developed? Devil's advocacy is a technique closely related to hypothesis testing, a technique we've covered in the previous lesson. It is believed to have originated in the Roman Catholic Church as a means of critically examining a deceased person's qualifications for sainthood. Learned churchmen took the devil's position simply for an argument's sake, to challenge the rationale presented in the nomination for sainthood, the idea being that through this process the truth would be exposed. We take on the role of the devil's advocate to challenge the proposition, not because we disbelieve it, but simply to test its validity. Devil's advocacy does this by seeking, with either the same or other evidence, to prove the opposite of whatever the challenged view holds. The power of devil's advocacy lies in our compulsion to focus. As we've discussed previously, focusing tends to make us favor a particular outcome or solution early on in the analytic process, often at the very beginning, long before we can objectively analyze the evidence and reach a conclusion. Devil's advocacy is analytically useful because it by design focuses on contrary or opposite viewpoint and provides a specific technique to evaluate the strength of an argument. By taking on the contrary viewpoint, it activates all of the instinctive behaviors associated with focusing, viewing the problem one-dimensionally through the lens of biases connected with that viewpoint, eschewing alternative solutions, valuing evidence that supports that viewpoint, devaluing and discarding evidence that does not. Devil's advocacy thus engages the very same mental tactics employed by the primary advocate, but applies them in opposition, thereby promoting objectivity. What's more, the devil's advocate goes a step further by seeking out and obtaining new evidence about which the primary advocate has no knowledge or curiosity, or that was disbelieved and discredited. This further step is the secret weapon of devil's advocacy, the extra dimension that makes it a formidable analytic technique. One of the intriguing things about devil's advocacy is that at no time does either the prime or the devil's advocate have to be concerned with negative contradictory evidence. The fact is, the pro-evidence supporting the devil's advocate's position is the con-evidence opposing the prime position, and vice versa. Thus, both the prime advocate and devil's advocate can disregard non-supportive evidence and focus entirely on the supportive. There is another curiosity about devil's advocacy. Take the issue of abortion. There are essentially two sides, pro-choice and pro-life. Which of these two positions is the devil's advocate? Well, neither, and both. It depends on which side one is on, doesn't it? This fact should give us all incentive when we take a prideful stance on some issue to carefully examine the opposing side's supporting arguments and evidence. The tremendous potential of devil's advocacy to undermine and show the weaknesses in the primary view is, regrettably, underutilized. People instinctively resist devil's advocacy precisely because it is designed to attack and undermine the primary view. Organizing or even proposing a devil's advocate approach is naturally interpreted by the prime advocate as threatening. Yet, if one is truly interested in achieving the most beneficial solution to a problem, devil's advocacy is unquestionably an appropriate analytic technique. One way to employ the devil's advocate technique is to assign two competing working groups to analyze a problem with only two hypotheses, one to seek evidence to prove the first hypothesis, H1, and the other to seek evidence that supports the other hypothesis, generally referred to as the null hypothesis, or H0. For example, H1 equals Saddam has an active WMD program, and H0 equals Saddam doesn't have an active WMD program. Each group should be charged with presenting their findings separately to a person who would weigh the two views and make a decision on that basis. To assign these inherently conflicting analytic tasks to a single working group would be tantamount to letting a single lawyer both prosecute and defend the accused. We can, of course, employ the devil's advocate approach with good effect even when we are doing the analysis by ourselves. We simply work on one view of the problem and set aside our conclusions for a day or two to let our focus, mindsets, and biases relax and fade a bit. Then we go to work on the other side, trying to prove just the opposite with the same or different evidence. Keep in mind that, should you try this, you'll experience a strong reluctance to analyze the devil's advocate view. A little voice in your head will whisper, "Why are you doing this? You've already analyzed the problem, and you've drawn your conclusions. This is a waste of time." And you know the devil's advocate view of the problem is wrong. Your inhibitions against spending time on devil's advocacy will be powerful and relentless. But if you steel yourself against them and proceed, you won't regret it. Devil's advocacy will, with virtual certainty, open your mind to new dimensions and perceptions of the problem, poking holes in fallacious, self-serving arguments, and stripping away thinly reasoned and thinly supported analysis. Pause the video to download the article presented on your screen. Then take time to read and review the article before proceeding. Play the role of an advocate and list as many points as you can from the article that support the view that the federal government should allow industries to upgrade the MiG-21s. Also, list separately any additional points you know to be true but are not mentioned in the article that supports this view. Finally, list again the points of information that are not mentioned in the article that you don't know to be true, but if they could be substantiated, would support this view. Pause the video and restart the video once you've completed this task. Now that you've completed the list, we'll take a short break. Walk around a bit, relax, think of other things, and then return to the article and play the devil's advocate. Again, make 3 lists, but this time support the view that the federal government should not allow U.S. industries to upgrade the MiG-21s. Again, pause the video, take a short break, complete the assigned task, and then restart the video when you're ready. In playing the devil's advocate, did you hear the little voice in your mind counseling against it? Did you have a sense that the devil's advocate lists were a waste of time? If you did, it was your innate compulsion to focus talking to you. Your mind had already focused in favor of the primary position. It had already taken a stand. Now you were asking it to disavow all that and stand against that position, and your mind resisted. But as you undertook the devil's advocate position, did you sense your perspective of the problem broadening? Didn't the process of taking a position against upgrading put thoughts into your head that you had not even considered when you took a position in favor of it? It imposes objectivity, whether or not you consciously seek it. It compels divergent thinking. Congratulations for completing all the lectures and quizzes in this course. You now only have the final exam to complete and earn your certificate as a Level 1 Intelligence Analyst. I encourage you to review any lectures with which you struggled and review the prior quizzes before taking the final exam. Remember, if you fail the exam, you can take it again prior to attempting the final exam. Good luck. I wish you much success through better analysis and decisions. I look forward to seeing you again in follow-on courses.